Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. My name is Naomi, the How To Chick. I'm happy to be with you this evening. And I am here on the topic life engineering, one of my favorite topics tonight. So I hope that some of you are in the room. When I thought about going into coaching and when I started my mentorship journey, I primarily worked with very young ladies, anywhere between the ages of 15 and 21. And I thought that that was my niche. And I talked a lot about life hacking back then, but I recognize life hacking is retroactive. And really, our decisions have to be made prospectively. So I've updated that to life engineering. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about why your life must be from a young age aligned with both God's will and your capacity, i.e., what you were created to do. You guys know, if this is your first time catching one of my lives, my name is Naomi. I go by the How To Chick, and I am a child of God, a wife, a mom, an attorney, a coach, a mentor, and a speaker. But most importantly, I believe you can do anything but not everything, and you must choose wisely. Tonight, I'm here to talk about life engineering, and I'm here on when I was thinking about how to frame this, because you know I'm unapologetically a God girl and everything has to be based in and on scripture. The primary text that I thought about was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And I've talked ad nauseum about why this text matters so much to me. But what it says is, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And when I was thinking about how to frame life engineering, that text kept popping in my head. Because in many cases, we are trying and doing our best to make decisions based on the way that seems right unto a man, Proverbs 14:12, but the end thereof are the ways of destruction. And so trusting in God first, allowing him to help with those decisions, is a practical aspect of faith that a lot of people don't talk about. And so that's what I wanted to talk about tonight, because I've testified before that my first encounter with God was when I was 14 years old, and my second was when I was 16, and he told me where to go to college. And I never had any regrets in being obedient, even though that school was not on my radar at all. I never had any regrets about obedience, because God has curated the life that he has given me based on that obedience. Romans 11:36 says, for him and through him and to him are all things. And my husband always says this, and so I'm going to leave it at this, because we've done a whole lot of scripture and no life engineering, but faith is not faith if it's not practical. And so life engineering really is practical. We're living in a time where people are making life-changing decisions, our young people, based on TikTok, based on pressure, based on panic, based on image, based on chemistry that they have with other people, based on ambition, the desire to have money, convenience. And even those of us who are older are finding ourselves retroactively making decisions that are really based on fear and convenience. But when we've done that, then we go back and ask God to bless what he never asked us to build. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what that looks like and what it looks like to tell the truth about the decisions that we've made in our lives. Because I tell my children some of the things that I've gone through, some of what we're calling spiritual warfare, some of what we're calling oppression is the pain of decisions made without wisdom, is the exhaustion of carrying what looked good, sounded good, seemed like it would pay well, but was never assigned to us by God. And that's why sometimes our lives are out of alignment to prevent that. Our lives must be carefully curated. Not socially acceptable, not pretty, not cute. It means we don't just let anything or anyone into our lives, into our calendars, our relationships, our homes, our finances, and our decision making, because those things affect our future. And for my young ladies, I had to tell them, you have to stop acting like everyone's opinion deserves access. Every open door isn't a God door. And every large life decision must be treated as the spiritually significant decision that it is, because a lot of these decisions are not neutral. And I said this to my young ladies, but I'll say it, to everyone: who you date is not neutral. Who you marry is the most important decision you'll ever make. It's not neutral. Where you go to school, what you study, who employs you, what city you live in, what car you drive, where you live, the debt that you allow yourselves to take on. These decisions are not neutral. What you buy, why you buy it, these are not neutral decisions. All of it shapes your peace, your priorities, and your stewardship. Your emotional health, your spiritual health, your financial health, and your ability to obey God quickly is tied to this. And scripture is clear. If we trust in God, if we don't lean on our own understandings, and James 1 tells us God will give us wisdom. So when I was thinking about how to talk about life engineering, I'm thinking about it through a lens of perspective looking. There are things that we have already done with our lives that we cannot fix. 1 Timothy 6 tells us about people who thought they were just making practical life decisions, but they were choosing a way that seemed right unto a man, and running after money is the quickest way to a disappointing life. And that is the truth. I can tell you that. It is not the path to fulfillment, even though it seems practical if you've had to live ever out of survival mode. So tonight, I just want to give you 3 takeaways. 1, a choice can seem practical. A choice can seem ideal and still be the wrong choice for you. That's Proverbs 14:12. That verse is terrifying because what it really means is when we look at things through carnal eyes, our sincere belief, our intelligence, our understanding, our good intentions, even the research that we've done isn't enough. And what I've learned and what God has told me is that sometimes even our spiritual language, right? God opened the door. We're praying for God to bless our will. We've already decided what we want. And even our prayers sometimes become a cover for self-will because we pray prayers asking God to close doors that we are beating down. So something can seem right. Something can seem like it will add value to our lives because it flatters our ego, because it pays well, because it will give you status in the eyes of others. Something can seem right because everyone is going to clap for it. It can seem right because, well, it pays very, very well. The benefits are great because you are just tired of waiting. And you can't seem to find the right fit. So you take the right now fit. It can seem right because you're lonely, because it gets you out of discomfort quickly. But seeming right and is right are not the same thing. Relationships may seem right because the person is attractive, attentive, and they're interested. But when you start seeing the red flags, and I talked about this last week, they have no integrity, no reverence for God, no evidence of spiritual maturity. In dating, you're choosing your future. You're choosing the person that you will engage in spiritual warfare with. You're choosing the person you will parent your child with. You cannot date for convenience. College. And I tell my kids this all the time. My oldest kids had to choose their school and they had options. We told them, don't choose a school because it's prestigious. Don't choose a major because it seems like it will pay well. And this was a big thing. Don't choose a school because of the name where it will bury you under unnecessary debt, where it can cause you to be isolated from healthy community. And it can pull you into lifestyles that do not align with your values and that you don't, at whatever age you're at, have the strength or clarity to resist. Those opportunities sometimes cost more than the degree is worth. And it is important, and I'm not saying this to say that every child should go to a specific school. I've never been a person who said, if your child isn't in a parochial school, you're doing the wrong thing. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is making the decision that doesn't seem right, but is right. A major may seem right because it seems impressive, it sounds impressive, or maybe it's just easy. And, and the truth is, many of our young people are choosing majors based off of what the potential for out of college salaries are. But if you have not chosen something that suits your capacity and something that is part of your assignment eventually, you're going to find yourself trapped in your resume because you have kind of dictated the path that you're on. And now it's going to be harder to pivot. The employer may seem right because of the salary, but if the position is going to cause you to compromise your values, to work outside of hours, to, engage in unethical conduct, is that the employer for you? I remember going into a job interview, and I was talking to this person, and the Holy Spirit just had a hold on me. I was very restrained in my responses, and he seemed like a nice enough person. The work he did aligned with what I had previously done. The interview was going very well. He seemed very enthusiastic, but something was off. And I remember leaving that interview, driving home and praying and saying, Lord, I have been unemployed for, I think it was like almost a year at that point. And I need this job. But I know that something did not feel right in that interview. Please do not let that man call me back if that place is not a place for me. The interview went very well. He was talking to me about next steps and availability, but that was the prayer I prayed. And I found out later from people who worked at the firm that this person engaged in a lot of unethical behaviors. The culture was toxic. The demands were dehumanizing. The role would have destroyed me. He did not pay his employees properly. It was just a lot. And these are things I found out 5 to 7 years after the fact. But God does not just care about our spiritual health. He cares about all of it. If what you are anticipating doing is going to consume every ounce of margin that you have, it's not going to be a blessing to your life. The apartment, house, or car may seem great because it looks beautiful. It's in a great neighborhood. Everyone's going to be proud of you. But if the payment stretches your finances so thin that you lose your peace and start striving, stop giving, and live one emergency away from panic, the purpose was not served. That is not serving your life. Your life now serves that thing. And so we have to grow up spiritually. A mature believer doesn't just ask, can I do this? The mature believer asks, is this in alignment with what God has for my life? What will it cost me spiritually, emotionally, relationally, and financially to have this? Some decisions may not physically kill you, but they will kill your peace. They will kill your focus. They will kill your witness, your capacity to hear God clearly. And that's why I always talk about Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. So the first thing is that a decision is not right just because it looks right on paper. Not everything that looks good is good. We must acknowledge God in all our ways, not just at church or in ministry, not just when we're having worship. Acknowledge Him in dating. Acknowledge Him in budgeting. Acknowledge Him in applying to jobs. Acknowledge Him in the contracts that you make with people. Acknowledge Him in your big ticket decisions. Acknowledge Him before you sign a lease or pick a major, before you go on that second date, maybe even the first date. Acknowledge Him before you say yes to a promotion. A path can be exciting and be a logical next step and still be the wrong decision. So, one, don't trust what looks good. Trust God enough to let Him evaluate the path because He knows what's on the other side of it. Second, God's will can't just govern your desires, it has to govern your capacity. A lot of people aren't struggling because they're out of alignment with what they're doing. They're just doing too much in this season. They have a life, they have financial burdens that they can't faithfully carry because these decisions were made out of appetite and not assignment. And I talk about capacity a lot. Your life isn't holy just because it's full. Your schedule isn't anointed just because you don't have any empty spaces. Exhaustion is not proof of obedience. Sometimes it's proof that you're living outside of your capacity. I said it up front and I'll say it again. For Him are all things and to Him are all things. That means your life came from God and it has to be sustained by God. And ultimately, it needs to point to God. So if there is a decision that you're making that pulls you away from depending on God, from having the time to give to Him, that drains what He gave you to steward and centers around pleasing other people or proving yourself constantly, it's out of alignment. You can't talk about God's will without talking about capacity because God's will never force you to ignore the limitations and the season He has you in. Let me be clear. A person with 5 dependents does not make decisions the same way as a person with 0. A person who is healing from burnout and overwhelm simply doesn't have the same capacity as a person in a season of overflow. And a person who's called to build slowly and steadily is not supposed to be running after someone who is in their sprint season. And, I've had to have this conversation with many people. A person who's already carrying major debt shouldn't make major purchases just because everyone else is doing it. You went to school and all of your friends' parents paid for school or got Parent Plus loans that they've told them that they will pay for 2 years or 5 years until they get on their feet. But your loans are in your name. You're the only one paying your bills. Your decisions have to be around your budget, not what everyone else is doing. And that goes for capacity too. Capacity is stewardship of the emotional resources that you have. And this is where boundaries become so important. You have to recognize patterns in people and in places and in spaces. And you have to be willing to, I don't want to say eliminate people from your life, but curate the life that you're living to include people who not only bring value to your life, but who do not cause you to exist in spaces of self-doubt, to exist in spaces of envy or covetousness. Like, there are some influencers that I can't follow because that's not the life I'm leading. And when I'm watching them, I'm like, oh, I wish I could. And this is so crazy because there's this one influencer I follow. She has a ton of kids and she'll go like to Costco and spend like $1,200 on a Tuesday. And I'm like, I wish I could do that. Like, my budget is not going to let me do that. But I also don't have that many kids. And to be perfectly frank, I'm probably pro rata spending the same thing, but it's neither here nor there. Curate your life so that what's in it represents where you're going. Boundaries aren't for difficult people alone. They're for major life architecture. They're for engineering your life. You need boundaries around what kinds of relationships get access to your time and your energy. Who has access to you and what are they speaking over your life? You need boundaries around how much debt you will allow yourself to carry and what your plan is for paying it off. You need boundaries around the work culture that you will accept. You need boundaries around where your money goes. Budgeting. We just talked about this last month. The kind of environment that you will choose to live in. You have to have boundaries around how much potential you're willing to babysit in a relationship. Didn't we just talk about that last week? Every yes costs you something. If you choose a job, friendships, partners with chaos, you'll spend years managing what should have disqualified it up front. I know people who have gotten stuck in their careers. They had ambitions and they have been stuck at a single level in their career for decades. I don't even want to say years. It's been almost 20 in some cases because they went to the wrong place. They tolerated that culture. They built their lives making big purchases, leaving themselves no margin so that they were then trapped. So you're managing and asking God to bless what He never intended. And you're operating in a space with things that if you had evaluated them early, if you had left yourself margin, you would have disqualified that man before you had the baby with him. You would have left that job the first time the boss called you and said, yeah, I'm going to need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday. You would have left that friendship the first time that friend negatively compared her wardrobe to yours because she likes designer and you can't afford it. And I'm not saying you just drop people. There are times you have conversations with people, but our networks in many ways often represent our self-worth at the place where we entered that relationship. People don't just turn nasty. They were always that way. And sometimes we have a pivot point, a point where we have a good space to let the relationship lie, and we choose to hold on out of codependency, out of insecurity, out of fear of being afraid. Ruthlessly curating your life means accepting that not every relationship is intended to be for a lifetime. If you choose a college for prestige alone, you may spend a decade recovering financially or more. There are people paying their student loans in their 60s. If you choose an employer for money alone, you may sacrifice your peace, your relationship with your family, your marriage, your health. If you choose a living situation beyond your means, your entire home can become a theater of constant stress. If you continue to make purchases to maintain an image, you can bind yourself to a lifestyle that God never asked you to fund. The question isn't, is it sinful? Because none of these are sins. The question is, can I carry this faithfully and still fulfill my assignment in alignment? Jesus lived with clarity about his capacity. He didn't heal everyone. He didn't respond to every demand. He didn't go everywhere people wanted him to go. He moved with precision in alignment with the will of his Father. And many believers need to learn that lesson so badly. A decision is not wise when it exceeds the capacity God has given you to carry it faithfully and when it is made in the wrong season. Number 3, whatever is not surrendered to God will eventually be ruled by another master. I talked about the love of money earlier, but the word also tells us that we can't serve one master. Either we will love one or hate the other, or hate one and love the other. Money is necessary for life, but sometimes it becomes a driver of decisions. People are choosing partners for financial security, ignoring glaring character flaws. People choose majors for income and then wake up miserable, misaligned, and unable to get a job where they'd like to be. People choose a job or an employer for salary and then make compromise after compromise. They choose homes, cars, lifestyles to signal success. And I just talked about this, and then you're enslaved to payment. We cannot choose to stay in environments that are crushing us just because our finances are so tight that we cannot leave. But money is not the only false master. Fear, loneliness, pride, even the need for validation can affect your choices to the place where you're unable to choose wisely. Impatience is one that I want us to remember. When we are not willing to wait on God, Psalm 27 is one of my favorite Psalms. My kids say I say every verse is my favorite. But David says this. He says, I would have lost hope unless I believed I would see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And I think people misunderstand what that means. They think he feels like he's going to die before God allows him to become king. What he's really saying is, I hope, I choose to hope that God will fulfill his promise in his way and in his time. But until he says move, I wait. And we know that this is what David means because David had two opportunities to kill Saul and instead said, I cannot touch the Lord's anointed. God didn't give it to him that way. Any choice that we make, any choice that doesn't begin with God, that isn't filtered through God, and where the end goal is not to please him, can lead us into a place where we are out of alignment, unhappy, right? And we don't even know how we got there. If your life isn't curated around your plan, if your life isn't curated around your assignment, if God was never considered, there is a way back on the path. But that way is not always pretty and it's not always comfortable because there won't be applause. There's not going to be a lot of image. You're not going to be able to flex. God is often silent in these seasons. And so it can be difficult to walk away from a lifestyle that was built around an image. But curating your life is so important because it allows you to slow down. It allows you to hear the voice of God. It allows you to have peace in your decisions, even when they don't make sense. And please understand me when I say, a lot of people who know me in real life know that God has pulled me into some places where I thought, again, there is a way that seems wise unto a man. I've talked before about budgeting and how I was very set on doing 50, 30, 20 and operating in certain parameters. And God had to break me of that because he said, for you, I need you. And I remember when we first joined our church, the pastor at that time, we were at prayer meeting and he prophesied to me. He said, God said, you're in a 1 Kings 16 situation. I was so angry. If you don't know the story, that's when God sends Elijah to the brook Cherith and he feeds him with ravens. Elijah doesn't have a savings account, a career, stocks and bonds, even a pillow to lay his head on. He is there waiting on God to sustain him. If you have been in that season because you have obeyed, hear me clearly, that's not failure. It's spiritual alignment and God does eventually bless it. I will tell you, I was in that season. I was angry about that season for a long time, but looking back on that season, I can see what God did in my life through that season. Some of the best decisions you'll ever make are going to disappoint people. And those are the people who are more impressed by optics than obedience. But peace, alignment, and the will of God have a price. And the other option is to pay the devil's toll. And that is chaos. That is uncertainty. That is constantly chasing the next thing and never feeling fulfilled. You get to choose which tax you'll pay. So takeaway 3 is simple. If your choices and your decisions are not governed by God's will, they're governed by your appetite for fear. They're governed by your appetite or fear, image, or money. Those masters, if they are your masters, they always overcharge. Let me bring this home. This is for my older people. My people who have found themselves in a place that they never thought that they would be. You can still curate your life. Not every open door is from God. Not every good thing fits your capacity in this season. And not every practical decision is neutral or even spiritually harmless. Trust God, not yourself. What seems right can destroy you. And unsurrendered desire, especially around relationships, finances, and image, can cause some of the biggest regrets that we'll ever have. So before you make that next big choice, cashing out that 401k in a panic, selling your home and moving to Fiji, I don't know what decision you're making, marrying that on again, off again relationship, that situationship that you know is not right, ask, Does this align with God's will or just my desire in this season? Can I carry this with integrity, with faithfulness, and peace? And last, what's motivating me? Obedience or image? The older I get, the more I believe this. A blessed life isn't built by collecting every check mark that you made on your life plan when you were 18. It's not about exploring every available option or even becoming the version of yourself that you know would get the applause of men. A blessed life is built very simply in day by day decisions. Every decision matters. And not making a decision, in most cases, is a decision. Reject what doesn't belong. Make choices with holy clarity by trusting God. Curate your relationships, your commitments, your environments, your spending, and watch your life change. And if you do it just ruthlessly enough, you will see something that you've never seen before, and that is the light come back on in so many areas of your life. It gives you peace. It increases your prayer life. It gives you the capacity to hear from and obey God so much more quickly. So before this week is over, I challenge you to do this. Sit down with a pen and paper and list 1 to 3, current or upcoming decisions, and then put each one in prayer through these 3 filters. Is this God's will, or does it just seem expedient right now? Do I have the capacity to carry this well? And then lastly, what's driving this choice? Trust in God or something else? And if it's something else, ask yourself what? And then surrender your will. I'm telling you that exercise can save you years, thousands of dollars, and probably your sanity. I say it every week and I'll say it again now. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. You must choose wisely. And my plan, as for me and my house, I let God do the choosing. Have a good night.